Okay, for this section, we will be talking about the guidelines and checkpoints for engagement, representation, and action and expression. First are the guidelines for the principle of engagement. The first guideline would be recruiting interest. In this way, teachers need to focus on multiple ways to recruit interest in learning because learners may differ greatly in what captures their attention and piques their interest. Teachers need to continually be aware of what interests their students because these interests can change over the course of the year for the whole class as well as within a student. If information is not engaging for students, then information is inaccessible to them. For checkpoints for recruiting interest, teachers need to optimize individual choice and autonomy. This helps empower learners to take charge of their own learning. Optimize relevance, value, and authenticity. This connects learning to experiences that are meaningful and valuable to the learners. Also, to minimize threats and distractions. This fosters a safe space to learn, take risks, and also make mistakes, which can lead to further learning. Guidelines for engagement. Another is sustaining effort and persistence. Learners can regulate their attention and affect in order to maintain the effort and concentration that learning requires, but this is when they are motivated to do so. The ability to self-regulate differs greatly among learners based on initial motivation, their capacity and skills for self-regulation, and their susceptibility to contextual inference, and so forth. It is a goal for teachers to be able to help students build the skills for self-regulation and self-determination that will help give students with different levels of self-regulation to have the same opportunity to learn. And this can be important for students with behavioral disabilities to focus on for them. While being taught these skills of self-regulation, the learning environment must allow for regulating behaviors for all students regardless of motivation. The checkpoints for effort and persistence. Teachers need to heighten the salience of goals and objectives. This is to set a vision for the goal and tell the learners why it matters. Vary demands and resources to optimize challenge. Rise to high expectation using flexible tools and supports. Teachers also need to foster collaboration and community. This cultivates a community of learners and increase mastery-oriented feedback. So this can help guide the learning by emphasizing the role of effort and process. The next guideline for the principle of engagement is self-regulation. This is something we talked about a little bit, but this is the ability to moderate emotional reactions. And it's critical for learners so they can cope and engage with their environment. To be successful in implementing the UDL, teachers must explicitly address the need for self-regulation through modeling and prompting. Because of the difference in ability to self-regulate among students, especially students with behavioral disabilities, there needs to be multiple ways to foster and develop this skill. A checkpoint for self-regulation, promote expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation. So in this way, you can set personal goals that inspire confidence and ownership of student learning. Also facilitate personal coping skills and strategies. So you develop and manage healthy emotional responses and interactions and encourage those in your classroom. Develop self-assessment and reflection. This increases awareness around progress towards goals and how to learn from mistakes. Now we're going to talk about the principle of representation. The first guideline is perception, and to reduce barriers to learning for all students, teachers need to provide the same information through different modalities. This can be through vision, hearing, or touch. Provide information in a format that will allow for adjustability by the user. An example, text that can be enlarged, sound that can be amplified. This can be especially helpful for students that have visual or hearing impairments. Such multiple representations not only ensure that information is accessible to learners with particular sensory and perceptual disabilities, but it also is easier to access and comprehend information for many other students. Checkpoints for perception is offer ways to customize the display of information. This would be using flexible materials with settings that can be adjusted based on people's needs and preferences. Offer alternatives for auditory information, so share information in more than one sound or voice alone. And also offer alternatives for visual information, share information in more ways than images and text alone. Another guideline for representation is language and symbols. Learners vary in their facility with different forms of representation, both linguistic and non-linguistic. So as a result, there may be a lack of clarity when information is presented to all learners through a single form of representation. An important instructional strategy is to ensure that alternative representations are provided not only for accessibility to the information, but also so different types of learners have clarity and understanding of what the language and symbols represent. Checkpoints for language and symbols. To clarify vocabulary and symbols, construct meanings from words, symbols, and numbers using different representations. Clarify syntax and structure. This would be to make the patterns and properties of systems like grammar, musical notation, taxonomies, and equation explicit so they know exactly what the symbols mean. Support decoding of text, mathematical notations, and symbols. Make sure that the text and symbols don't get in the way of the learning goal, meaning that a student may not understand one of the pieces of the text or a symbol, so that interferes with what they actually learn. Promote understanding across languages. Use translations, descriptions, movement, and images to support learning in unfamiliar or complex languages. And illustrate through multiple media. Make learning come alive with simulations, graphics, activities, and videos. The final guideline for representation is comprehension. And the purpose of education is to teach learners how to transform accessible information into usable knowledge. Constructing knowledge as accessible for future decision-making depends on selective attending, integrating new information with prior knowledge, strategic categorization, and active memorization. Individuals differ greatly in their skills in information processing as well as prior knowledge, which can affect how they process new information. Proper design and presentation of information can provide the scaffolds necessary to ensure that learners have access to all knowledge. Okay, the checkpoints for comprehension. To activate or supply background knowledge, this builds connection to prior understandings and experiences. Highlight patterns, critical features, big ideas, and relationships. This is to accentuate important information and how it relates to the learning goal. Another checkpoint for comprehension would be guide information processing and visualization. This supports the process of meaning making through models, scaffolds, and feedback. And finally, maximize transfer and generalization. This is to apply learning to new contexts.